Hello, my friends. Good afternoon. It's a sunny afternoon, as you can see very well right here. I'm going to sit this way so that my head isn't lit up halfway like it was on the last one. Good afternoon. I'm Pastor Lou Kilgore. I'm pastoring here in the physical location of the High Mountain Presbyterian Church in Franklin Lakes, New Jersey, but I'm also wherever you are right now through the genius of electronic transmissions. I still remember when I was much younger, my children were much younger, I was on a trip through Europe, the one and only trip that I've taken through Europe. It was a big vacation. And we boarded a train in Germany, and we were going from Germany to, I'm not quite sure where we were headed, but I noticed over in the seat next to me there was a person who appeared to be talking on a telephone. And it was unthinkable to me because it was, first of all, it was a big thing, but it was more like a phone than it was a walkie-talkie. And I understood at that point that was the first time I'd ever seen anyone talking on a wireless phone. Wow. Things change fast. And so here we are, not only we can talk on wireless phones, but I can talk to you in person, and you can see me live. It reminds me too, I'm old enough to remember the first television, and I bought into the idea as a little boy that those people were in the box. So by the miracle of technology and human invention and creativity, I'm here and you're there, and we can, at least I can talk to you, and we can do this thing that the Pastor Chat sets out to do. We are coming up on the fourth Sunday of Easter. There are 7 Sundays of Easter, 7 Sundays and 50 days. 50 days because 50 days was the feast, the Jewish feast of Pentecost, which marked the arrival in the Promised Land. And so we have this 50-day period, and the Christian church has, through time and tradition, has established that the 50-day period after the celebration of the resurrection of Jesus, Easter Sunday, that those 50 days and those 7 Sundays are marked out to be the Sundays of Easter. And just like we did during Advent, and just like we did during the Christmas season and the Epiphany season, there is a specific kind of posture for this time period. It's not a law. That's not what these are. These are helpful patterns. These are things to help you to structure your life of faith. A life of faith can just be a wandering. It can produce nothing if you just wander aimlessly and you don't really seek to grow. You know, there's an image. You can grow in faith. You can actually learn how to have more faith and allow faith to take a bigger root in your life. And these disciplines of Lent and Christmas and then the Epiphany and now Easter and the Easter season, they're there to help deepen your connectedness to Christ and to the life of Christ. I shared with you the last time that I was here that in this season, I've been looking for and sifting through for unique kinds of thoughts, unique ways for us that we are to be Easter people. We are to be people who do not deny the brokenness of the present day, but that we look forward to the day to come. We look to the east. We are buried facing east. Our churches face east, at least the historical churches do. And the reason for that was they looked for the rising sun. The hope of Christians is the rising sun, the new day that arrives. And it's not just the new day of that Easter morning when Jesus was resurrected from the dead. It is what happens every day. When the sun comes up and we are walking in faith, we look for the signs of what's new, of what God is doing, where life is beaming, where that which is dead is now being made alive. And I'm not talking just about life after death. I'm talking about that's a cycle that goes on in our lives and is important to strengthening our faith because life is hard. Sorry, I have a little cough today. My spring allergies have now finally taken root, and it'll affect my ability to talk to you today. So we are Easter people. We look to the east. We are oriented toward God and towards faith. We're oriented towards what God is doing that is new. Behold, I am doing a new thing. Do you not see it? And that God is responding to our prayers with the power of forgiveness, and forgiveness plows the ground like the farmer who plows the hard and dry earth from the fall and from the winter. The ground is turned over, fresh soil is revealed, and then as the lumps are broken out, the seeds are planted, and what is new and full of life can take root and grow in our lives. Now that's a metaphor, but it's a very good one. The agricultural metaphors work very well in terms of how faith is for us. How is it maintained? What does it do? It is like a plant. It grows if it's fertile, if it's cared for. In one parable, Jesus said that, a farmer sowed some seeds on the ground, and some fell on rocks, and they grew up and then died. Some fell among weeds, and it was choked out. All these metaphorical images are there to remind us that faith, it just doesn't survive on its own. It needs tending and care. It needs to be in fertile soil. It needs to have an environment that helps you to overcome the power of all that is around us, which is full of death and despair. We are Easter people. I also shared in one of the other chats last week that during Easter in the historical church, we didn't kneel to pray. We stood to pray because we had been raised up. We have been stood on our feet in this life with the power of the resurrection of Jesus. We stand up to pray, and no more fasting, no more depriving ourselves, no more of just the inward journey. Now it's the outward looking. It's the looking towards the sun and the life, going outside and noticing the trees, and they're blooming so beautifully today. There's power in that for living. Even on the worst days, there's power for living that you can draw on in terms of seeing how life works and how new life and new things and new ideas come. I had a good friend who years ago, just one that I'm talking about. I've had many friends and many colleagues and many church members who've gotten fired. And this particular person got fired and was just devastated by being fired. It was horribly humiliating, and so he came in for a chat and we talked for a while, and I shared with him something that I've learned a while before then, and that was that something like 95% of the people who get fired, although it's traumatic and it's terrible and it's awful, the firing leads them to a reorganization and classification of their life, of their gifts, of their skills, and they not only land on their feet, but they tend to discover that they got fired because that isn't where they belonged anyway. And that became a springboard for them to get where they really felt they belonged to do what they really wanted to do. Out of death, it's out of death, it's out of the death of what is. Sometimes we accommodate ourselves to things that we need to not accommodate ourselves to. And so then when they come falling down in the rubble, in the ashes out of that, we search through the rubble for the things that remain, the things that are true, the things that are good, and we begin to build again. We build again. Easter people, enormously optimistic, enormously optimistic. And even though individually we don't all feel that way, that kind of it's just the character of this faith, of this religion, if you will. This is a religion of ultimate hope, of incredible confidence in the course of things, in the path of God. I do not believe, we think about the relationship that we have with God, I don't think that God is an overlord who is by the hand of God, just moving us here, then there, then there, then there, then there. That's not really how I see the resurrection. The resurrection is what the crucifixion is what human beings do. We sacrifice, we torture life, we punish love. But God meets us where that happens. God meets us in the crucibles, in the wounds, in the places where life pushes us down. I don't believe it's God doing that. Life does that. It's broken. It is broken. And I say it like that because there's no real clue in Genesis who broke it. It doesn't say who broke it. Adam blamed Eve, Eve blamed Adam and the snake, and then Eve and Adam and the snake together blamed God and said, you are responsible for how broken it is. But in the end, it's never resolved. Who broke it? That's irrelevant. It's a fact. It's broken. Relationships are broken. And not just individual relationships, but relationships in the world, relationships in nature. So much intricate part of nature is part of relationships, and we are built up of a nexus, a cosmic nexus of relationships between big parts and little parts. And when the relationships don't work, all hell breaks loose. And they don't. They systematically do not work. They break down. I was once briefly friends, in acquaintance way, with Dr. Francis Koop, who was a Surgeon General of the United States. And I had a young boy who was in my congregation, had a brain tumor. And Francis Koop was a surgeon, and he was that child's doctor in the Philadelphia hospital. And I sat in the waiting room with Dr. Koop. He was a very personable doctor, great person-to-person relationships, and he sat there struggling, knowing this boy was suffering, the parents were suffering, and he sat and reflected with me just a little bit. He said, you know, what's really baffling to him is that a brain tumor, the brain kills tumors all the time. Tumors are just bad information coming to the cells of the brain to duplicate more cells. We need more cells here. And when unnecessary brain cells grow, the body kills them all the time. We talk about cure for cancer. But Dr. Koop said the body eliminates cancerous growth, tumors all the time. It's always identifying the necessary and the unnecessary cells. And in the brain, the unnecessary ones are very threatening. But he said what we can't figure out is, why doesn't the body get the signal? Why doesn't it do what it can do to kill it? What does it take to turn it on? And that's what they're working on now in cancer research, how to turn on the body's mechanism that tells it to kill the tumor. Because our tools going into a brain, a sensitive area, to remove a tumor, it's like driving a bulldozer into a shop for sandcastles. It's terrible. Now, the chemotherapy tries to do that, but the chemotherapy is so deadly to the body in other ways. It's broken. We see the signs of the brokenness. We don't step back and go, well, it's all God's purpose that a child 6 years old should have a brain tumor. God forbid we ever embrace the brokenness of the world in that way. We are Easter people. Easter people know the crucifixion happened. They know the brutality of the Romans was inflicted on Jesus. We know the pain was real, the suffering was real, the grief for his family and friends. It's all real. It's all broken. It's the brokenness. The gospel is the message that out of the broken mess, without asking who's responsible, out of the broken mess comes the power of God to redeem, to renew, to restore, to make new. In the long, dark night of the soul, joy comes in the morning. When the sun rises, it doesn't mean it's going back the way it was. Jesus was raised from the dead. He didn't go back to the way things were. He didn't go back to fishing with the disciples and multiplying the loaves and teaching the lessons. It didn't go back to the way it was. But new life had begun in Jesus, for Jesus, and new life had begun in all those who were his disciples then, and then millions upon millions who have become his disciples since. New life, Easter. They give us 7 weeks, 50 days to absorb and to remind ourselves of what the message of Easter is so that it can be applied in our lives in very practical ways. To be people who look for what is new. I think I've told you I was a pastor in a church where a 17-year-old and a 19-year-old, or 18 and 19-year-old teenagers were in a car crash, and the 18-year-old was jettisoned out of the car and had terrible brain concussion on a tree, and he lay in the bed in the hospital, and I went in. The doctors knew then that he probably would never awaken from the tumor, from the paralysis that he was in, from the coma. And for 2 days, the family wept and they grieved and they tore their clothes, the equivalent of it, and they could not believe what was in front of them. And then tenderly and gently, at the end of the second day, the doctor and I approached the family to begin to talk about harvesting the young boy's organs. He was a very healthy boy, except that his brain was broken. At first, it was a horrifying thought to the family, but they were Easter people too. They were. It didn't lessen their pain, but they began to see that out of the wreckage of that car and his life and his body, yes, the grief was still palatable to them, but they began to see, by God's grace, an image that someone could receive a heart, someone could receive transplanted corneas from his eyes, and all kinds of good things could come from what had happened in a terrible, terrible tragedy. And so they agreed. We are Easter people. We're not people of denial. But we don't kneel in our prayers during Easter. We are people of the morning. We look for the morning. We look for the the rays of light that break over the horizon from the darkest nights. It's Monday, my friends. It's Monday, approaching the 4th week of Easter. Spring is all around us. My allergies are blooming like flowers. This week, I'm telling you just in advance, for those of you that listen every day, I'll be here today. Obviously, I'm here today. I'll be here tomorrow, and I will be here on... No, I will not be here on Wednesday. Wednesday, I'll be going for a doctor's appointment, and then some of the details of the celebrating event of my daughter's wedding will begin to happen on Thursday and Friday. My dad will be coming, and he'll be with me. I'm going to go pick him up. So I'll be taking a couple days off leading up to the wedding, which is on Saturday. And so I won't be here on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of this week, but I will be back on the following Monday. So I'll see you tomorrow for this time of the chat. I'll be asking you how you're doing. I'll be asking you to think about how the Easter faith has taken root with you, and how is it growing, and how is it blooming. Bless you, my friends. I'll talk to you again very soon. Bye for now.